Hello everyone, I'm here with Roubi L'Roubi in the Saatchi Gallery, presenting an exhibition, Forests and Spirits, presented by FG Contemporary. Roubi, thank you for having me here in the show.
Yes.
It would be good to hear more about the show, how it came together, and the works in the show.
Yes. Hello, Sharon. Thank you for asking me about the show because it's a very personal show in a sense that I wanted to tell a story of three artists of two different generations, and perhaps one of them is more known out of the three, but actually there's a connection between their work and their connection also with their educational background. Of course, it's very obvious location-wise they are from the Sudan, from Khartoum, the city. They had a similar start in their educational process or schooling.
Okay, so should we start with the works in the show and the artists in the show? Let's start with the artists. Who are the artists?
There's three artists. There is Kamala Ishaq, which is a female artist. There is Ibrahim El-Salahi, and there is Salah Elmur. So these are the three artists.
Okay.
And yes.
Okay, perfect. So what work are we standing in front of?
Yes, this is a piece by Salah Hamel, and it's from one of his continued series, which is the studio. Salah's father was a photographer, and he had a studio called Studio Kamala. So all the works that you see actually set in like this, posed in front of a camera, is inspired by the black and white photographs that were from his father's studio, and also historically it's known in Africa a lot of these studios existed, they still exist, where you're going to have a family portrait or a wedding portrait, etc. This particular one is called the family portrait, and you can always see these curtains in his work and the checked flooring, which are actually typical from the studio. It's one family, and the portrait invites you to interpret the dynamics in this family and who are the characters. So you have two female figures, a male figure, which you can assume is the father, the husband, and a child. It's not atypical from a family portrait. The thing is, who are these two females? Is it a first and a second wife? Is it a mother and a daughter, teenage daughter? The child is in a way quite straightforward. This is a child and the husband. But what's very interesting in all his work is also how the body language is. If you see this particular figure, she has her hands together like this and the legs a little bit crossing, so she's a little bit uncomfortable. So it actually invites the viewer to form their own opinion.
Okay. I was going to ask about why the male figures on the back and the two in the front. Is that reflective of?
I think that's reflective of a lot of, in my opinion, it's reflective of a lot of African nations and Middle Easterns, where the actual leading figure in a house is a female. The female is a very matriarchal society where the female is the center of everything. Decision making, child upbringing, responsibilities. It's quite a misconception from other parts of the world that it is not the case. The woman is the central figure. So in a way, this might be a subconscious decision by the artist to do that. The male is secondary in any of these houses.
What about this one?
This one excites me a lot. The reason is that there are two male figures, I think father and son, or two men. Again, in the studio, you can tell by the curtains and the check floor. But what is really amazing is that these are Sudanese, supposed to be Sudanese males, typical color of the average color in Sudan, etc. Yet they're holding artichokes, which is actually not grown in Sudan. So for a native Sudanese person or local, they will wonder what is this vegetable or plant. I find that very, very intriguing because Salah is based between Egypt and Sudan, and the two countries of Egypt and Sudan are very close. Almost all the families have roots on both sides of the border. And he spent quite a bit of his time in Egypt, and I think knowing in Egypt the artichoke is very common, It's used in many dishes, like typical dishes, and I think this painting for me represents the soul of this artist, where it shows both his heritage, the Egyptian, I think, and the Sudanese. So I think it's such a wonderful painting. If there's one painting I think that can show the artist, and so I discussed this with Salah, and interestingly, he found my point of view interesting because I think he must have done this subconsciously because he is familiar with both, but I think Egyptians only or Sudanese only will connect perhaps with only part of this painting and wouldn't know why the other is not clicking.
Okay.
Yes.
This one is stunning. I really like the colors in this. Can you tell us about this?
Yes, this is again in the studio. Check floor, curtains, the curtains again are yellow, etc. It's about a girl with her, the equivalent of werewolf in Africa, or in North Africa is called Mudvayne. But just think of the werewolf. And you can see it's a fictitious animal. It's got green eyes, yellow eyes, and red teeth, etc. And the girl here wearing her white shoes, in a bit innocence, has this. What I find interesting is that why is a girl having her scary, fictitious animal posing with her as if it's a pet in the studio? Because it's a kind of animal that parents or grandparents would typically scare you with, saying, if you don't behave yourself, we're going to get the Mudvayne, or Mudvayne is going to come and eat you. So yet here, the girl is very happy posing with the animal as if it's her pet, quite confidently and quite affectionately. What does that say? I don't know. It just intrigues me that you have this. Is it? Yes. I mean, would you pose with a werewolf?
I wouldn't. I suppose it could mean that she's maybe confronting her fears, or maybe she's learned to accept it. She doesn't look very happy in the picture, so.
I think she looks very confident. Maybe she's fierce.
Yeah.
She's fierce. Also, interestingly, you have the beginnings of the tree, because there's a pot plant here with a tree that leads into the rest of the exhibition, which is around the theme of the tree. And you will see it in the next paintings, where the tree is the central backdrop of it. So it transitions from the studio series into the forest series, and hence the name of the exhibition. Yes.
Which work is this?
This is a family day out.
Okay.
And this is very, very exciting because it was the first painting of the series of the forest. In Sudan, the meetings of the Blue Nile and so in Sudan, there's a meeting of the White Nile and the Blue Nile. They meet in a place called Mudvayne, which is a meeting place. It becomes a Nile. The Nile goes from Khartoum into Egypt. As it happens there's a little forest, a wood called Sunut. And with this forest or wood, families usually go there for celebrations, as we do in London, to go to the park or Richmond Park or something like this on different occasions. It could be Easter, it could be all sorts of public holidays. And as children, we used to go with my parents there because there's a little nursery where you buy pot plants. And you have here a typical family out. And yeah, they're coming back with some pot plants. And obviously they spent a day at the wood or forest. This Sunut forest has a red type of wood, which is one of the species of acacia, and is connected to the other tree by El-Salahi, his first sculpture, the meditation tree, which is also Haraz tree. So there's a link between them. Interestingly, when this work wasn't framed, the composition is much taller, and what the artist has done, explained to me, he was painting it and he thought he really liked it, and he compressed the whole painting into a smaller canvas, where you have one tree, the beginning of the bark, and then the rest are the pot plants. And as you saw in the last painting, there was one pot plant, and now is tending to go to the next series.
So I have to say that this is actually my favorite painting.
Yes, I think
I love the red and the blue.
actually it's on loan from a collector, and it's his favorite painting. Okay, I think this painting is called the Red Forest. I was speaking about the forest of Sunut. The actual wood is red, not this bright red, but it's actually it's got a color that is more red than brown. And here I find this interesting in the composition because it took a family that would typically be photographed in the studio series, and it's actually placed them within the forest. And I think first you think it's just kind of a juxtaposition, but at the same time you have to remember that if it's a special occasion, it's a birthday or a wedding or Easter or any of those occasions, you'd maybe go to the studio to get photographed, and afterwards you'd go to the wood to celebrate and to picnic. So they're always in their finest clothes. So the whole series, first when you see them and you don't know about where this place is, you'd find it odd why are they dressed like this. But actually most of the time you find people quite dressed up walking there or picnicking. So this is a family now seated, and I think it's a father and a mother and children. You can interpret it in different ways. Also introduces the check. The gingham in fabrics is very, very popular in Sudan as a design, and you see it here. It features in other paintings. Okay.
This is a star piece, isn't it?
Yes. This is one of the bigger canvases that Salah works on. I find it very, very expressive in a sense. It's called The Bride and the Queue of Admirers, or The Female and the Queue of Admirers. Again, it is in the forest, but what is interesting is they've got 4 male characters and the female. The female is dressed in a wedding dress, but actually the artist thinks it's just a point of femininity, that she is a female. What's interesting, the character here you have to her left is standing very, very confidently and facing forward. So he's a male figure that actually managed to win over the bride. So he's out of the 4 admirers. He actually is happy that he's standing there because he's actually got her. Mm-hmm. The other 3, you see an expression, disappointment, anger, hope. They're all facing sideways, and there's a part of them saying, well, we thought we stood a chance, or we signed a chance in a sense. So these are the guys that lost, and he's the guy who won. And it's just I think it's a theater of life in a sense. All over the world, these scenarios are always there, and in a way, it's an expression of adulthood. And again, the woman is the central figure. I think that's again in a lot of, from my point of view, in a lot of African societies where actually the woman is the decision maker. In a family, etc., she chooses the male, she runs the household, and again, it's a good role for, well, it's a good example of African society.
Excellent. So this work is by Kamala Ishaq?
Yes. This is the work by Kamala Ishaq, a woman artist. Her name is Kamala Ibrahim Ishaq, which is she's from Sudan, and then she was at one point at the Royal College in London, actually 2 times, doing painting and graphic design. What is very interesting about Kamala, she's credited together with Ibrahim El-Salahi, other artists such as Ahmed Shibrain, to be the founders of the school, the Khartoum School, or as an art movement. There were other numerous artists from Sudan that were all part of this movement aesthetic. But together with Salah, they were studying here in England. She's she's really occupies herself for this body of work with a ceremony called the Zahar ceremony, which is an exorcism ceremony that is conducted in parts of Africa, very much as let's say voodoo in South America, in the Christian world as exorcism, but not necessarily of evil spirits. So I will just like to speak about the work from my understanding and my point of view growing up also in that part of the world. This ceremony is actually conducted mostly by women, and is to exercise certain characteristics out of a possessed person. In this painting itself, it's called The Possessed Women. So all these characters are supposed to be possessed by spirits. Yes. So if you really think about it, how paintings communicate, or in a certain way, you identify or you connect with a painting and then you read things to it. So I think it's a very good example of visual communication, and it's just wonderful to see a narrative through paintings. So you have two artists here where Salah Elmur is showing sitters in a studio being photographed, or a family day out, just going about everyday life. And where you have Kamala Ishaq showing more about the spiritual world and the ceremony of the Zahar, the exorcism, etc. So it's just sharing my personal experience.
Amazing.